Hey everybody, and welcome to Libromancy, a podcast about the magic of books. Today I'm going to be talking about the utterly uninteresting and unadventurous tales of Fred, the vampire accountant. So let's audit it. I'm probably going to shorten that title just down to the tales of Fred, the vampire accountant, because it's a mouthful to say, but this was such a great book. It had me laughing from start to finish. I thought the world was built wonderfully, and it just kind of expands upon itself. The style of this book is a little different than most books, where it is 5 short stories that are all combined into one book, and the amount of time varies between each short story. So in the first one, you're going about a week, 2 weeks, sometimes a little more. But let's just get started. Our main character. Oh, this is going to be spoilery. Sorry, I know we're getting into the spoiler quick, but there's not much else to say aside from the fact that it's about Fred, who gets turned into a vampire and remains an accountant. So let's talk a little bit more about it. Fred was an accountant, and then he got turned into a vampire and just kind of woke up one day, realized he'd been killed and turned into a vampire. And instead of going crazy, he was a very shy guy, just decided, hey, I'm just going to keep being an accountant. And, he figured out a way to get some blood from a doctor that he did some shady book work for, so it's all good there. And of course it starts off where he is going to his high school. He's getting ready to go to his high school reunion that he's decided he will attend. And, you could really feel like the emphasis of like, oh yeah, it's like a boring, sad life. He doesn't do much or do anything. So funny though. He gets to the party. He feels the same way he did in high school. Nobody pays attention. He doesn't really know anybody. He doesn't care. But he does meet Crystal, who he used to know, and they've both changed a lot, and it's funny. So, of course, while he's at his high school reunion, everything can't go right, and so there are some werewolves that have come to his high school reunion. They're tired of lying low, and they're gonna just kill everybody and eat everybody. Turns out that Crystal works for an agency, and that's its name. That's all we ever get to call it. But works for an agency, and, one of her jobs is taking down things like this happenstance. So they work together. They're able to save everybody at the high school reunion while Fred thinks he's being really sneaky and, oh, nobody would see me do this. And it's just so funny. Later on, they go out and they're meeting afterwards, and Crystal's like, so, how long you been dead? How long you been a vampire? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a poor, socially awkward accountant like I've always been. And she's like, yeah, I know, like, that you did this and you climbed this wall without making any noise and nobody's that tough. And he's like, okay, like, you caught me, but, like, I'm not a bad vampire. Like, don't kill me. And she's like, well, that's not what agents do. We don't just go around killing everybody, but we have to make sure you're following the right rules. So they agree to go on another date, and that's kind of the end of that story. So great. So the next 2 part of the story is it's the night of their date. Crystal shows up and says, hey, we're going for a surprise. Where are we going? Let's see. And where does she take him? She takes him to a LARPing convention. For those of you who don't know, LARP, or live action role play, where people pretend to be things they're not, play a game, have a backstory and everything. And this is super funny. She's like, we just have to be here for a little bit and then we can duck out. But kind of as my agent, there's been some talk of a figure skulking around. We got to just do a little check, but we'll have fun. And she knows that he has a tough time lying, so she actually registers him as a vampire. So funny. So they are going through this, and he's like so confused, trying to figure out, what he's actually supposed to be doing. And it turns out that the head of the LARPing convention, a young man by the name of Neil, is actually a real-life necromancer and is going to sacrifice a bunch of people in the LARP to gain more power. Here we also meet Albert, the zombie, who was Neil's best friend growing up, and Albert died. Neil had to bring him back, and he did. So Neil is getting ready to sacrifice everybody, Fred included, and Crystal comes and gives him a taser and takes him out of the fight and, arrests him. But they don't arrest him for, getting ready to perform a ritual and kill a bunch of people. He's arrested for practicing magic without a license, which was super funny. and he goes and he gets put under another teacher, under another mage who is a teacher, and they go out and have a fun rest of the date. And Fred actually hires Albert to help him with his accounting because he needed somebody to help him with this transition and can't go out in the day, and Albert can. Super funny though. Just the whole story, the whole LARPing experience. Oh my gosh. Laughing out loud. So our next story, as I said, there's 5 in each book, and this will be our third, and we have 2 more, is about Dracolings, which are kind of like lesser dragons. They love greed, they love gold, they love making bets and deals. I hope you can see where I'm going with this one. That's right, we're going to Vegas, and Crystal has been called to Vegas for to help a friend who is in debt to these Dracolings, and we get there and we meet Bubba, who is a weresteed, or a Therian is what they're called as the general species name in this. And Crystal challenges the Dracolings for the debt, and then she loses and has to become their slave as well. And because Crystal is a girl, when she challenges, they play chess, and she lost. And when Fred challenges for Crystal, he has to win a joust. And if you didn't guess it, Fred and jousting, very different ends of the scale. I hope you can see where this is going, but it was hilarious. So they're trying to come up with a plan. How can we best, this knight who's got tons of practice, and like they don't take a bet that they don't think they can win. And honestly, looking at it, Fred's not the best for physical things. So they go in, right, and they're trying their best using Bubba the weresteed, who is a pony, and a small pony at that, to try and win this joust, and it's not going well for him. And then the last time, he takes off his armor, and he's like, okay, I've come up with this crazy plan. We're going to try something different. So he rides on Bubba's back like kind of like a surfer standing up, and he avoids the lance, and then he swings his lance, not as you would a lance, but swings it like a baseball bat, and smashes the other knight right off the horse, and he ends up winning the bet. Just hilarious. Had me laughing out loud. And of course, they bring Bubba back with them to live in their small little town of Winslow, Colorado. Super funny. Just hilarious again. The settings, the stories, the way they're told never makes you feel like they're being rushed or pushed, or that they are unrealistic in this kind of unrealistic fantasy world that we're seeing. Just hilarious. So another thing that we start learning is that the vampires all the mythical creatures have their own rules and, tax laws and things like that. And the way they are stored is they are stored in a very boring and dull Dungeons and Dragons style manual that, supposedly there's always that rumor. There's that one person, there's a couple people who really love that system, but it's actually just how they keep all their laws out in the open. Super funny. So the next story, 4th out of 5th, is I call it The Missing Mentor, where Neil shows up at Fred's house and he says, hey, I went to my lab. I don't like you, but I went to my lab and everything's been knocked around and messed up, and my teacher Amy is completely gone, and I can't do anything because he's been locked, so he has to be within a certain distance of his mentor before he can actually do any magic. He's like, I'm worried about her. And so Fred's like, well, I don't know what I could do. Let me call in some help, and calls Bubba over, and Bubba's like, okay, I know somebody who can help, but we're just going to try. So they go and they meet Richard, who is the head of the Therian society, kind of in this area of Winslow, and a little bit more, I would say. And he is a were-lion, so incredibly powerful, and they present their case. He turns them down, and then they mention that it's for Amy, who is Neil's teacher, that's missing. And Richard's like, well, you should have mentioned that it was Amy, because I have a vested interest in keeping Amy alive and happy and working good, because I host Gideon, the king of the dragons, not king of the dragons, king of the West, who happens to be a dragon. And that's bad, he likes her, so he has to try and keep her alive. So they go searching all over town. They find one issue after another, and at the end of the night, it just turns out that Amy got super, super high because she was working on something to affect Gideon, the king of the West, as a dragon. And so it has to be a very, very potent drug in order for it to affect him. Just hilarious that everybody thought she was kidnapped or in danger, and she just was really high and out doing magic and not thinking of the consequences. And true to form, she did get the munchies when they caught up to her. Just hilarious. So funny. I just loved it. The fifth one is called A Monster in the Pews, and this one actually gets a little bit more serious. There's still some funny parts to it, but I like that these stories, that while they're funny, they're not like you have to laugh every second. They're not like telling jokes every second, but the way they play out is just funny. So in The Monster in the Pews, Quinn, Fred's vampire father, has come back and seen that Fred did not go on a murderous rampage, did not kill a bunch of people, and is not excited about it. And so Quinn kidnaps Fred's girlfriend, Crystal, of course. By this time, they've kind of progressed, and takes her to the church and says, hey, come get me if you really will, come at midnight. And Fred's like, well, I guess we gotta go. And they kind of get the crew. They get Bubba, Neil, Amy, Albert, and they all start trying to brainstorm a way. And at this time, it's interesting when he switches perspectives, because this is all kind of written from Fred's hand, is the way it is, kind of like a journal writing or like a letter. And so when he switches, he always puts at the top, and now I'm going to give you, turn the page over to Crystal, who was doing this at this time, and since we weren't together, I don't know what happened, so I'll let her tell you. And then it comes back and it switches and it says the same thing, just backwards, where it's saying, now I, Fred, am writing it again. Just a little bit funny, but interesting way to go about it. So Crystal, on her point of view, is like, okay, well, I flashed the signal to Fred to not try and come get me at midnight, then I'll come back. I've got this handled. I'm an agent. And on Fred's side, he's like, okay, we got to go get her. She didn't know that this was going to happen. Not that we don't trust her to be able to handle herself, but we don't want her to get in trouble. And so they all go after her. And Quinn has revealed his plan to Crystal that he'll use a spell to boost himself, and then he'll go crazy and he'll end up killing Crystal and feel really bad. And then he'll go on his murderous rampage that Quinn wants him to, which was just a bad plan and my idea. If he'd have taken 10 seconds to get to know Fred or follow Fred at all, you would have figured out that Fred's not that kind of guy. So they get there, they stop Quinn, and then they're kind of celebrating at the end. And it turns out that Quinn was not quite dead and kills Crystal, rips her throat out. And now this part actually surprised me. I didn't expect it. We kind of have known throughout the story that Crystal has more to her than you would seem, that she's got some kind of special power or ability that allows her to be this mythical agent of the agency to do power, to stop problems when they arise. But we have really no knowledge of what it is at this point. And we find out that when she dies, she actually has a devil inside of her, and if she wants, she can kind of pull it out, or if she dies, then the devil will fix her, and she gains a power boost. She gets the claws, the anger, and she rips off Quinn's arm and is like, oh, I told you I was going to beat you to death with your own arm. Unfortunately, Quinn escapes, but yeah, it was just good. She calms down. She's like, why didn't you just stay home? I told you I could handle this. And he's like, I didn't know what those blinks were. How was I supposed to know that you were blinking to stay home and not worry? Of course I'm gonna worry. You're the first girlfriend I've ever had. It was just nice and cozy and funny. And that's the end of this book, The Utterly Uninteresting and Unadventurous Tales of Fred the Vampire Accountant. Now, if you think to yourself, man, that wasn't very unadventurous, well, just trust me, when you read it, you do get the sense that he is uninteresting and unadventurous in the beginning, and that all these things happen to him more by chance than by design. So if you have the chance, these are quick, fun, so fun reads. They are impressive. I really enjoy reading Drew Hayes as an author. I think these are good for what they are. You can somewhat find some good morals in them if you really look, but just on the fun side, a good read and a good story. I highly recommend it. That's going to probably wrap up my discussion about the Tales of Fred the Vampire Count number 1. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you have any questions or comments, please send them to libromancypod@gmail.com. If you want to like and review wherever you listen at, that would be very helpful and much appreciated. I hope you guys have a great day, and always remember to audit the magic of books.